This is an Athearn Bluebox switcher, and it needs some work. First up, a test run. I'm not entirely certain how well this thing runs, but I think it should run because it's an Athearn. I'll give it some voltage. It was moving for a second. And there it goes. This thing definitely needs a wheel cleaning and some fresh oil, but this seems like a pretty good start. A bit of background information before we get to work. I bought this unit in a lot of rolling stock, plus this locomotive for about $40 on eBay a few months back, and it's finally time for me to work on this thing. So, to start, I'm just going to take the shell off. I believe it should just be simple clips. I'm not entirely certain, but I would be surprised if it's anything different. And it was just simple clips. It looks like, judging by down here, there's a few little posts on each side of the frame, and that's how it clips into the body. Just a little bit of an inspection. Everything in here looks really shiny. The trucks and whatnot seem quite a bit filthy. Those need to be addressed, but these flywheels are rather shiny. The bar up here looks to be in really good shape, so I'm probably going to leave that instead of replacing it with some wires. But it looks like this unit just needs a good cleanup, and everything in here is in pretty nice condition. Now, to remove the trucks. This front one on most of these Bluebox engines is usually the most difficult to access. It's mostly just because the light housing's in the way, but that came off pretty easily. Something weird about these Bluebox switchers is that their trucks, unlike all the other Bluebox units, which are held in just by those worm gear covers, they're actually held in by clips on the side of the truck, which makes them kind of annoying to get out. That one seems to go pretty easily. I'll remove that bar. But you just gotta pinch one side in, I believe, and then they can just fall out. To get those trucks back in, I think it might be useful for me to remove these, so I've taken them out for now. It's not really required, I just think it'll make my life quite a bit easier. So looking at this, I think I can move this out of the way. I'll just bend it back into shape a little bit. But for now, I can ignore the frame, set that off to the side for a while, and we can focus on both the trucks. I've looked both these trucks over, and I might have found a potential problem. This one, as you can see, rolls really smoothly. You can probably hear that there's nothing odd with it. However, this one, if I bring it over here, you can kind of tell it's jumping a little bit. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it on my microphone, but it almost sounds like it's clicking a little bit. So I'm sort of suspicious that this unit might have a cracked gear. I'm pretty sure I've got some spare Athearn axles I can throw in, even if they aren't brand new, which should work perfectly fine, but that is something to be cautious of, which you'll have to check when we dive into that truck. So I'm going to set that aside, set its worm gear and worm gear cover aside, and we'll focus on the non-problematic truck first. As you likely saw while I was taking this thing apart, you saw that this wheel came off of the axle, and I've taken a really close look at it, and I'm not sure how well it'll show up on camera, but this gear itself is cracked, so I'm going to have to replace it. Luckily, I did take a look through my parts, and I've got 3 spare Athearn axles. Since we've got one good one here, I think that should be more than enough for the rest of this unit. I've got one replacement right here, and that's what we'll be replacing it with. I'll probably need to give it a good cleaning as well, but I guess now we can start cleaning off all the good parts now that we've eliminated the poor part. Now that all these components are clean, it's time to give them some fresh oil and reassemble this truck. Perfect, now that that truck's done, it's time to move on to the rear truck. Just like the other truck, I inspected the wheel sets here, and I have found another cracked gear. However, it's a lot less prominent than the one on the other truck, which is odd since this one was hopping, making every sign possible that it had a cracked gear. So I don't know what the case is there, but it definitely has a cracked gear. This one, as you can see, it slides straight out. The other gear here does not do this, and neither does the replacement I have. So this one is pretty obviously cracked, so I'm just going to replace it because, again, we had issues with this truck. It's better to just get rid of it, even if it's not a huge crack. Now, it's time to clean out the second truck. Alright, now that that truck's put back together, it's time to put it back into the frame. However, something I did notice is that truck did not feel as free as the other one. I'm sure a little bit of fresh oil, just a bit of running and all that'll help it out, but it's a little bit of a concerning sign that I'm going to keep an eye on in the future. Before I reinstall the worm gear and all that, I'm going to clean off the commutator and oil the bearings of the motor, just so I don't forget to do that. These motor mounts also feel a little bit dry, so if I want to keep this thing long term, it might be a good idea to replace those, but for now, I'm just going to run with the ones it has in it. Now I can move on to the worm gears, which are sometimes the more annoying part. With this first truck here, it's usually the most annoying, the second one's better, but hopefully it's not going to be too big of a hassle today. That one went in without too much of a problem, and now it's onto the rear one, which should be much easier. Now I can finally put the metal contact bar back onto this thing. And finally, the shell gets to go back onto it. Now, it's time to test this thing out and see if that fresh oil and a bit of cleaning helps this unit run much better. Now, let's see if any of that work paid off. I'll give it some voltage. That's definitely a lot smoother. I'll bring it back. It's not completely silent, but for a Bluebox, this is pretty good, especially considering I've had some really loud Blueboxes in the past. It's nothing crazy, but I think this engine will serve its job as a switcher really well. All it'll really need at some point in the future are some new motor bearings, and probably some Kadies. Maybe some shell upgrades, cosmetic repairs, and all that stuff, but mechanically, this engine is just about sound.